All right, so the entire D.C. press corps was getting wasted, schmoozing with celebrities and high-ranking government officials and other journalists all weekend long here in Washington. So today, the mainstream media decided to fill some airtime reminiscing and replaying all of the hilarious jokes that were made at what they like to call the nerd prom.
The President, the First Lady join our nation's journalists, along with celebrities, athletes, politicians, newsmakers, to poke a little fun at themselves. It is the annual White House Correspondents Association Dinner.
Well, you take Hollywood glamour, you mix it with Washington power, and that's the White House Correspondents Dinner in a nutshell.
The annual White House Correspondents Dinner hosted this year by Jimmy Kimmel. It's the ultimate intersection of journalism, politics, and celebrity.
This is the one night, the White House Correspondents Dinner, that we don't make an issue of the president being a jokester, making cracks. This is the night that you're supposed to have comic timing.
He delivered plenty of zingers directed at a who's who of Washington and Hollywood in the audience.
It's one of a few nights of the year when Washington gets to be funny, and they get to do it on purpose.
It's great to be here this evening in the vast, magnificent Hilton Ballroom, or what Mitt Romney would call a little fixer-upper.
The press,
Nothing's off limits.
politicians, nothing is off limits.
An annual weekend of parties that some of us now mockingly call DC's nerd prom.
This year, it was hosted by comedian Jimmy Kimmel. It is affectionately nicknamed the Nerd Prom.
Now, there is an entire discussion to be had about this event, how it perfectly represents our completely impotent press. And by that, I mean this one weekend is the perfect convergence of power and those who love it. Those who are drawn to it. Those who, let's face it, admire it. If you had a press corps that actually wanted to be a government watchdog, have an adversarial relationship with the all-too-powerful elites that they're supposed to expose, well, then quite simply, they wouldn't spend tons of money to go rub elbows, get drunk, introduce their significant others, and take pictures with the very people they're supposed to be watching year in and year out. Now, let's face it, it's also probably the only chance that the nerdy wonks here in D.C. are going to get when it comes to meeting celebrities like Charlize Theron or Kim Kardashian. And yes, Kim Kardashian was actually there. But while the mainstream media spends the day reminiscing, let me highlight something else that happened here in Washington this weekend. While the president was telling jokes about Mitt Romney, jokes about eating dog, human rights activists, lawyers, even some journalists, the rare kind that choose to report on the atrocities committed in the name of the war on terror, well, they gathered at the first International Drone Summit. So here was a meeting of minds that actually want to discuss the damage that's been done, the questions that have been raised by a counterterrorism policy that focuses on killing rather than capturing, and killing from afar with the push of a button at that. So here people actually spoke about the civilian victims of drone strikes, the innocent people who have died, who the government doesn't like to talk about, because the CIA doesn't even acknowledge that its drone program exists. Except, of course, when it's an official who gives off-the-record information about it to the journalists that will say nice things about it, who they just partied side by side with this past weekend. Now, there were a lot of speakers, including some of our guests. Clive Stafford Smith, who was on the show on Friday. Shahzad Akbar, the Pakistani attorney that represents victims of drone strikes, who finally was given a visa. And Jeremy Scahill, one of the few reporters that's actually gone to Yemen, gone to Somalia, to see what the situation is like from the ground of our shadow wars. Now, here's just a little bit of what he had to say.
The real death panels that we have in this country were unleashed on our own citizens. The Republicans like to talk about death panels having to do with health care. President Obama is the one that's operating secret death panels that also can include United States citizens and often include non-U.S. citizens. The vast majority of the victims around the world of this policy, of course, are not U.S. citizens.
Oh yeah, this is the government that's killed U.S. citizens via drone strike without any due process. That little detail that a press corps that it's a government watchdog would be outraged and completely disturbed by. But it's so much more fun to just ignore that, right? To get to keep partying with government officials and celebs. And so that's what the mainstream media chooses to miss.